Hi, Deborah. I see you're here. Randy, I see you, but I can't see you. Are you there on the audio?
I am here, yes.
Okay, great. Well, it's 3 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. I appreciate everybody joining, as well as those who are listening in or auditing. Let's do a quick roll call to make sure everybody is here officially. Commissioner David Cahill.
Here.
Commission Chair Deborah Doyle.
Here.
Commission Vice Chair Thomas Hauser.
Here.
And Commissioner Barbara McKenzie.
Here.
All right. That's great. Thank you. All right. Public appearances. Are there any members of the public who wish to address matters not on the agenda? Did you receive any public comments by email?
Hold on. I don't believe so.
Okay. In that case, we have no action items by motion, so let's move quickly into the discussion items. The first discussion item at the last commission meeting on December 7th, the commission approved the contract with Randy Seipel and his team. I just wanted to get an update on the status of the contract negotiations. Anne, I guess that would be you.
We've received a contract and it has been signed by both parties. So we are good to go.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic. Glad to hear that. Randy, welcome aboard officially.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I had a question about the contract, but before I ask, do any of the other members of the committee have questions, concerns, or comments about the contract with Randy and his team?
Andy, this is Barbara. I just had a quick question. You mentioned the contract and Randy. The contract is actually with the County of Sonoma, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
Is it?
Officially it is, right?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
I stand corrected. Thanks, Barbara. Any other comments, questions? The one question that I had is in reviewing the contract, it looks as though the library will be invoiced bi-weekly based on actual hours worked. Have we received any invoices yet, Anne?
No, we have not.
In general, I know that the Finance Committee does not get involved in this level of review, but I'm wondering if members of the committee feel that it would be useful and appropriate for us to take a look at the invoicing over the next few months just to see how it aligns with the estimates. Because although the contract did include estimated time, we are billed based on actual time. Any thoughts on this?
This is Tom Hauser. That's fine. Every couple of months I wouldn't start for a couple of months until we see what's happening.
Okay.
I guess is what I'm trying to say is getting started. It's probably going to be more, and let's not be, it's like the $25,000 cutoff that we're discussing. It's too much detail some of the time.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, especially since some of the work early on will be on the audit. And let's maybe revisit this in a few months just to see to what extent we're in line with the estimates, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, and I think if staff notices that there's a problem, then they can bring it to us, but
Okay,
Andy, this is Barbara. I just have one further kind of comment about that, which is, it would be interesting to know from, I don't know, management standpoint, how long some of these things take to do. Maybe we would be getting estimates on how long it takes to do the, the monthly reports, work on the audit and whatever these particular types of work are, just from a staffing standpoint, I think it would be interesting.
Barbara, are you saying that in addition to the work that Randy and the County of Sonoma are doing, you're wondering how much time the staff is spending on these various items?
No, sorry, typically I'm not clear. What I'm saying is that we're looking for a CFO. And so it would just be kind of interesting to find out how long it takes to, to do the monthly reports and some of these other items that we're contracting out for.
Well, yeah, that would be the purpose of getting the information, is so that we could see what the actual is relative to the estimate. Are you okay if we put this off for a few months and then?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, then I'm going to suggest we move on to the financial reports for November. And I think what we should do, first of all, Randy, thanks for making all of the format changes that I had requested after the last meeting. I really appreciate it. I think what I'm going to suggest is that we go through these one at a time and just ask whatever questions you have about it. So the first, thanks Jane for pulling that up, is the report that appears on page 5 in the packet.
Would someone like this larger?
Yes, it would be good, Jane.
Okay. How about that?
Good.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. So, Randy, I'm going to jump in on this one because I had a couple of questions with regard to the footnotes. It looked to me that what you had done in the previous month's report, we had included sales tax revenue that was received in the months of July and August. And I know that the revenues we received in the month of July were actually for May, and the revenues that we received in the month of August were actually for June. And it looked to me as though in this month's report, you removed those revenues and put them back in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. Is that in fact what happened?
Yes, that's exactly correct. I had not up to that point looked into the actual month-to-month receipts. My presumption was when I saw that you actually had sales tax revenue recognized in July and August, that perhaps we're just going on a cash basis and not an accrual basis, which would explain why we would go ahead and see something posted in July and August. However, once I dug into it, I noticed that we only had recognized 10 months of revenue in 1920. And so essentially what happened is that it's not a cash basis. The library is using an accrual basis. And so essentially an accrual was not done in 1920. So for comparative purposes, you want to obviously have 12 months in each of your fiscal years. So I'm working with Ricky on getting the adjustment actually posted in the system as we speak, as a matter of fact, but I wanted to reflect what it's actually going to show in this report. And so therefore, yeah, there's quite a significant change in your year-to-date sales tax, but it's offset by an increase in the prior year sales tax. And I think it's good so that, I mean, obviously for comparative purposes, you want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples when you're looking at your sales tax revenues.
Right. And that made sense. I just wanted to be sure that was in fact what had happened. I had another question about, and again, thanks for, I had asked in the footnotes to include the number of pay periods that were reflected. And I'm assuming, you know, I'm going back and looking, I see one for July, one for August, 4 for September. I'm assuming that there was some delay in capturing those during that period, but that going forward, we would be on a more current basis. And I was curious as to why November only included one pay period.
I can't answer that exactly because I don't know the exact reason. I'm going to guess that it has to do with the holidays between Thanksgiving holiday and perhaps Veterans Day. That why the accounting staff was unable to get the adjustment posted or the allocation posted. That's my guess. I can't say for sure why we only had one posted in November.
Okay. I guess the question, and maybe we'll just see over time, is going forward, would it be reasonable to expect that we're generally going to see 2 pay periods posted in each month, as opposed to sort of this fluctuation that we've been seeing?
We should. That's the standard for all of or the majority of our clients. We would see 2 a month, and then twice a year you will see 3 in a month. We generally have 26 pay periods in each year. And I would like to point out that last year through November 30th, they had posted through the 11/9 pay period, whereas this year we only posted through the 10/24. So they are 1 pay period behind, but it's not significant.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions, concerns, comments on this page?
This is Tom Hauser. When I printed it, I lost the last 3 columns. And so I have, the same situation I said before. If you're going to have all these months in there, when we print it out, we don't get it. And then if we get multiple months, the print's going to be so small that even on a computer, we won't be able to read it. So that's just something I want to point out, that the way a lot of us read it is to print the thing and then try to look at it.
Tom, I'm going to ask that you and I take this offline because I printed it out without any problem. So I don't think it was in the PDF setup. It may be something with your printer setup.
Fine with me.
Okay. Sorry that happened. And understand that we're going to have to look as we add more months. We may need to spread this out onto 2 pages, but I'm not sure why you're having the printer issue that you have with this report. Was that true with any of the other reports for you? Was this the only one that cut off on the right side?
No, this is not the only one.
Okay, so I'm going to guess that all of the horizontal pages are not printing properly for you.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. I'll
Did anybody else lose Andy?
I did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Andy,
Yeah.
Doc,
Yeah, I believe he's probably going to sign right back in.
Have I frozen? Everybody else?
Yeah, frozen.
You
Now you're
froze, Ann.
Am I
Andy.
back?
Now you're back. You're back.
So I asked and I didn't hear, did anybody else besides Tom have problems with the printer?
No.
No, I did not.
Okay, all
Oh,
right.
this is Barbara. I didn't actually try to print this because I tried to print last month and I had the same problem. And right now I'm using my library iPad for the meeting and I can see pretty well. And then I have my desktop where I have it, I can blow it up, but it's not a great system. I really wish we could get these reports on paper. So that's a comment for the future. I don't think it's my printer, but maybe it is.
Yeah, I would support Barbara. I would also like to see a printed copy of the Finance Committee packet come to us.
Jane, is that something that we could do?
We could do that once I'm back in the headquarter office with the printer. I have no printer at my home.
Okay.
We could also, Andy, we could also ask the branches to print it out and have it available at curbside if the commissioners would like to pick it up from their local branch.
That's
Oh,
true.
That's very nice, Ann. Thank you. Would that be a solution that would work for the commissioners who are on the call?
Sure.
Fine with
Yes,
me.
that'd
I
be
think
fine.
Barbara's quite a ways from her branch.
Are you kidding? No, it works for me. It's not ideal. I mean, again, it would be really nice to get these. I'm looking forward to when we're all able to be in a, normal situation and we can see this easily, but I would be more than willing to pick it up at the library.
Okay. All right, so I'll follow up with Jane next month to make this happen. Sorry for the inconvenience. Just a quick comment, I find it very helpful to compare where we are to the percentage year to date. And, with November, we're 5/12 of the year, roughly 42% of the year. Now, the sales tax, we're actually only showing 3 months collected. So we would only expect to see about 25%. We're actually running ahead of that. So that looks like good news. In terms of our major expenses, salaries and benefits seem to be running below the expected 42%. So that looks very good. Other contract services are running above, and we can look at this more closely when we get into the specifics. I'm going to suggest we move on to the next page, please, Jane, the cash balance summary.
That large enough?
Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Were there any questions, comments, or concerns on this page?
Andy, this is Barbara. I had some questions about it. The gifts and donations and the bequests are really big numbers. And the wine library is, again, a small number that I've commented on before. And then under restricted cash, we have the David Charles Johnson Endowment and the National Endowment for the Humanities. So we have more restricted funds than this. And one question is, are these funds that have come in just this year, or why are we showing just these funds? And then secondly, just in terms of these rather enormous gift and donation and bequest numbers, just the details on those, or whether those are holdovers from the past. I'm just surprised that we have these really big numbers on there. I personally don't know about them.
Well, I'm going to let Randy answer that, but I'm just going to point out to you, Barbara, that although the totals are high, they have not changed that much since June 30th.
Right.
You're right. So, we have $2.9 million in bequests, but June 30th, we had 2.86 million.
Right. And that's why I'm just wondering if this is an old number from some past. I mean, where did this come from originally, these numbers? When were they first start showing on our report?
I'm assuming they've always been there. We just maybe haven't seen them.
That's what I would assume also.
It's new information we're getting. One of the questions I do have, especially about the gifts and donations, is there are two things I'm aware of that people have expressed concern. Money's been given and they don't know whether it's been spent or not, or how much is left. One is the Kundy Fund, which gives money for the Sonoma Valley branch every year. And we have some severe concern there about what the status is of the money they gave this year. And then the Sonoma County Public Library Foundation had some questions at their meeting last month or the month before about had the money been spent. And so one of my questions would be, what actually is in gifts and donations, and are those two items, the Kundy Fund, which is a separate foundation, and the Sonoma County Public Library Foundation gift, are they included in that item number?
Yeah, so I'm gonna enlarge that a little bit and ask Randy, would it be possible for us, possibly next month or on some periodic basis, to get an exploded view of these totals that showed in more detail the specific funds that are included in them?
Well, can I just suggest that we have Siri give a report on bequests and donations and the fundraising, so that then she could handle it. I'm not, I mean, the numbers are important to this committee, but I think that if we're going to talk about that, we need to talk about the larger, the larger context of where the gifts came from, when the gifts came, and that sort of thing.
This is Barbara. I agree with that. That's really what I'm trying to get at is,
Yeah.
Are these old, funds that have been rolled over year after year, what's in them? They're big numbers.
Yeah.
And also back down under restricted cash, we have restricted funds. Tom mentioned the Kundy Fund. I'm aware of the Petaluma, has significant restricted funds. So more detail on all these when what's in them, I think we really need to have a handle on it.
And is that something that Siri has access to?
I think so. Anne, what do you think? Could we have a development report, or will? Mr. Hauser, are you looking reluctant?
I know that at the Sonoma Rally Friends that Kundy has been very upset because that money comes from her mother-in-law's estate and it pays in, and she's asked, well, did it get spent on what it was supposed to be used for? How was it used this year? And we have not for 5 or 6 months been able to give an answer to that question.
Mhm.
And that's not a good thing to happen. We need to be able to answer that question. And the Sonoma County Public Library Foundation has a similar question. And what I'm saying is we have to figure out how we get the answer to that. And I do not think Siri has the answer to it. I think it's hidden somewhere in the books. And that's why I'm asking the question now, because it needs to be brought to a top of a list of figuring out how we answer those questions. We can't just keep pushing this aside, because we've got to develop a system that people don't get upset when we can't tell them what we've done with their money.
Yes, that's completely right. And a lot of it, I'm afraid not all of the donations were entered into EFS, and these reports are based on what we have entered into EFS. So our suspicion is that our series of CFOs kept this information separately, and the staff who are there currently don't have access to that. They don't know where to find it. So we're trying to work through that process and get a more transparent record keeping system set up, because you're absolutely right. They need to have that accountability. We need to be able to tell them what we've received and what we've done with it.
Could I add something quickly? In past completed audits, there are lists of, I know restricted funds are in those. So it's one where to look for some of this information.
Good.
We are going to be discussing the audit later in this meeting. I guess my question following up on Barbara is the audit likely to answer the question that Tom is asking? will it include information about at that level of specificity around specific donations or restricted funds?
If I can
I
jump,
don't think they can do it. The accountants can do that. The accountants only work with the information that they receive from us. So it's either got to come out of EFS or some side pocket that Ann is suggesting the money's being kept in or something like that.
What I'm questioning, and Randy, I'm going to let you answer this, is in order for us to complete the audit successfully and get an unqualified opinion, will we need to have provided this information?
so generally the audit will look or the audits are done at what we call the fund level, and everything that we see on this cash balance summary are the funds that I have identified in EFS. Unless I miss something, there are no others. So everything is included in one of these. What do we have? 7 funds here. The specificity, easy for me to say, that you're asking for these donations would have to be requested in as a separate type of audit. The auditors will not go to that level. As far as how to track it internally so we can get you those reports, that's something where cost accounting comes into play. We have to make sure that we're coding the initial deposits to a specific cost code, and that all uses of those donations are also coded against that same code, so we can run a report at that level. And we recently had that question come up about Kundy. I spoke with Ricky, and we did look at what she felt was, or told me was, the cost code that had been used for Kundy. And we were able to come up with an amount, but I cannot attest whether or not that's accurate, because I don't know if everything that came in was coded correctly or if everything that went out was coded correctly. And that's where it's very, very important to identify those areas that need to have that kind of tracking. I can certainly incorporate those into these monthly reports, but I have to identify those first, obviously, before I can build that up. So I will certainly take a look at what the detail is for gifts and donations at the cost coding level to see if that helps. I imagine it'll probably lead to a number of questions, but we can go down that path when we get to it.
I want to say,
Ann?
I don't think that the information for Kundy or the Sonoma County Public Library Foundation needs to be in a report we see. I just want to make sure that when it's asked for, we can give them the answer. I don't think we have to look at that particularly as a committee.
Right.
Okay.
And I have a question about the side pockets. When someone gives it in donation to the library, if the money does not go into EFS, where does it go? Do we have other bank accounts? If so, how are they managed?
We don't have any other bank accounts. The money would go into the library's account. It's a matter of where we're keeping the detail on where the donation came from and what it was intended to support. And that's where we're having the difficulty right now.
Well, I hope we can follow up on this. It's not, of course, good public policy to be unable to account for some public funds.
Yes.
So this is Barbara. So Randy, when you go back and do your, closer examination of this, under other restricted cash, again, this one pot of money, the 50,000 is noted as restricted cash. I don't know if that's separate from or different than a restricted fund, but if it is, then under gifts and donations, if you could let us know of those and the bequests, which of those are restricted in some way also. Again,
Absolutely.
I'm familiar in seeing those more, detailed out in our audits, but there's, quite a bit of money that is, it isn't in the general fund to be spent.
Yes, when I first set this up, the only ones that I knew for a fact would be restricted would be your endowments. So that's why this is structured the way it is now.
Okay,
As I learn more detail, I will pull out anything that would also fall under restricted and move it accordingly into the right spot.
great. Thank you.
So as far as the to-do item, I just want to be clear so we can capture this for the minutes. It seems to me that we're asking Randy and his team to work with the library accounting team to do a more in-depth examination of funds 74810 and 74815 to identify what we can about both the source and both the revenue and expenditures that are related to those two funds. Am I correct?
That sounds right.
Well, I would just add again, and if there's restrictions on the funds.
Mhm.
No. My immediate concern is the Kundy money and the public foundation, the Sonoma County Public Library Foundation money. So we can give them an answer,
Yes.
because they're the ones that are asking right now, and I don't want them squeaking out there and being upset.
Right.
All right.
Okay. Jane, did you capture that? Jane?
She's muted.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, it's on the recording.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay. The next, did somebody have another comment? Okay, the next report is the voucher payments over $25,000. We're going to come back as a separate discussion item and talk about whether we want this report, whether we want to amend it or look at it differently. For the moment, I'm just asking if you have any questions or comments specific to the information that was captured in November.
This is Barbara. I'm sorry, I have another question. This one is for the entire year, though. This starts in July. It goes through the end of November, correct? And I thought one of the reasons we were even having this conversation is because there were a whole lot more items that we were looking at now than we used to. And so for example, I see Sammy's camera that I see every month on here, but is this a complete list of everything over 25,000? So it's only just 4 items for November?
Yes, so these are all voucher payments. These are actual checks that were written and paid out of the system for the library. There are a number of transactions larger that are journalized, which I don't think would belong on the report like this.
Well, could you tell us an example of the journal entry? That would be like payroll, obviously.
Payroll is the primary one. There are a number of transactions in payroll that would be over 25,000. Again, the allocation journals, and many of the journal entries that you see are moving money between or recording expenses and revenues between different funds. It's kind of an in and out type of situation. Yep. So this is your actual cash outlay, cash out the door, more than $25,000.
Okay, so only 4 items for November.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? We will come back and talk about the report as soon as we finish reviewing all of the financials. Okay. Then the next report that we're looking at is property tax budget to actual. And this first page is the revenue page. And as we don't really receive property tax until December, not a lot of information here. Did anybody have anything on this one page? I'll take that as a no. So then let's go on to the next 2 pages. These are pages 9 and 10, which are the budget to actual for the expenditures related to property taxes. I have a few questions here, but I wanted to first yield the floor to any other members of the committee who have any questions or comments about where we are. Anybody want to say anything?
This is just a technical question and back to this thing. I'm looking on my library iPad right now and I can't see the entire presentation here. And then I'm flipping over to my big screen on my computer and it's so small that I can't read it. So it's very difficult to follow, given at least what I'm using for technology.
Right. Well, I think I think we've agreed that we have to. I mean, I'm sorry you had that problem. I was able to print it out without any problem, but obviously not everybody can do that. And so we will arrange for the library to print it and make it available going forward.
Yeah. Can everybody see this though, what Jane has up there? Can you see all of it?
No,
Well,
No,
Jane, we've got a close-up, which is only a portion of the page.
I can make it smaller so you can see the whole thing.
Feeling when you do that, it's going to be hard for people to see, but yes, let's go ahead and try that and see what it looks like.
yeah.
But that's still not everything, is it? I can focus on the right or left side if you wish.
Well, we're going to have to, I think what we would need to do is fit it in left to right. We won't be able to cover the whole page. We'll have to start at the top and scroll down a little bit. Can you bring us up to the section on salaries and employee benefits at the top of page 9?
Okay. This one?
Yeah, and can we make it a little bit wider?
Okay. Is that good?
Okay, let's,
Well,
we lost a little bit on the right side. Can you reduce the size 1 step and let's see what that does? One more. Okay, I guess that's about the best we're going to do. Yeah, it's really hard to see, and but it is. I think that's the best we're going to get. I'm just going to jump in with the questions that I have, and I think, Anne, these are probably going to be more to you than to Randy. But I'm looking again. I'm looking at the percent year to date, and I'm looking at numbers that are larger or significantly larger than roughly 42%. Because that tells me that we're spending faster than we had anticipated. So, for example,
Janitorial services.
Janitorial services. Thank you, Dave.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Okay. We're at 89% of our budget 5 months in.
Right.
That's going to get worse, isn't it?
It's going to get worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been having to do a lot of additional cleaning. So that's where that originates. But we do have some savings in other areas, and we can look at that and see about making some budget adjustments, moving from one line to another to cover that.
Yeah, it looks like we're spending about $30,000 a month on janitorial services, and that's been pretty consistent since the start of the year. And I don't see anything that's going to change that in the next 7 months. So I think that we do have to just look at other areas.
Should we be changing the budget, amending the budget, adjusting the budget, whatever the word is?
We can. Another thing to mention is that we added janitorial service at Forestville this year. We did not previously do that. And granted, that's a very small location, but it is an addition.
Are there overall comments that you would want to make, Anne, that before we start diving into the individual items?
Well, I think Andy's point is a good one. If we look at places where it's more or less than we expected, that tells us that our budget was not, things have changed since the budget was formed. And so we need to look at what kind of adjustments need to be made, or is it a case where we can scale back on something? Janitorial, nope. Can't scale back on that. So maybe there's something else we can do.
I think it would be good to go through some of these numbers, 89% for janitorial, 78% for landscaping.
Now the landscaping, those are projects that we have been working on. So that's not going to continue to grow each time. We may have front loaded some of our expenses there.
Telecommunications, data lines.
Yeah, that'll.
So I think we need to go through the whole thing and just pick out some really big ones and then kind of decide, should we be adjusting? And then if we've got really low ones, can we take money from those and adjust that a little bit? Because this is halfway through the year and probably we should have a look at whether we're going to be within our budget overall is my concern, not whether every line item is on top is correct.
Right, and I'm gonna I agree with everything that's been said, and I'm gonna ask that as we do this, the percentage year to date is like the first sort of flag that calls out, hey, we should look at this, but we should also recognize the total dollar amount. So for example, telecommunication data lines, yes, we are at 87% of the budget, but the budget amount was only $20,000. So even if we were to go over 100%, we're talking about basically an additional $20,000 expenditure. Whereas, something like books, media, and subscriptions,
right,
we're at 125% of the budget, and we're over $1 million. With minor equipment and tools, we're at 240% of the budget, and we're at 120,000. So I would say that, some of the big, if you could comment on some of those larger items and let us know, has the library shifted priorities? Were there unexpected increases in some areas? And should we, to Tom's earlier question, should we kind of do a formal budget revision mid-year to reflect these necessary changes?
Well, in the area of collections, definitely we've added a lot more of the digital materials that are more expensive than print materials, and same with our downloadables and streaming services, because that's what we could give people for a long time. And now we're back to ordering some of the physical materials as well. We did scale back on that, but it's very likely that we will need to do a budget adjustment. I know you already did and allocated more money to collections, but it may very well be that we need to do more. I have not gone through this in great detail because I couldn't see it very well either, but I can print it out tomorrow and then maybe send you comments on more of the items there.
I think that would be great because, really, I think what we want to be clear on is that we have a reasonable story, both internally and externally, for why we're doing things. It makes perfect sense to me that we are overspending in some areas because that's how we can provide service to people during
Right.
this time. And let's recognize that. Let's swing into that. And if we have to look to prune some other areas where we can't do as much, we can be open to that.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think that given the fact that nobody can see this, we should make a follow-up item to have a detailed discussion on this. And Ann, maybe this is something you and I and Deborah can take up offline before we get together as a finance committee to dig into some of these items so that we can shape the presentation a little bit. Would that be okay?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Excuse me, may I say, when I sent out the packet, I also included Randy's Excel spreadsheet if that was any help. But if it does not help, then I just wanted to throw that out to, it's a choice for looking at it.
Yes, appreciate that, Jane. Thank you. And I think that as we do this, we'll look at those expense items that have gone significantly higher, but we'll also look at the totals because, as we've said, our revenue picture is a little rosier than we had expected. And so we may be able to make adjustments that are not too painful and that will reflect the changing priorities that we need to address. I'm going to guess that the same thing is true as we get into the budget to actual for the sales tax on pages 11 through 12, that most people have not been able to read it in detail. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
The one thing I'll call out here, Ann, if you have a comment on it, was other contract services. We're at about 52%. Year to date, we're at about $487,000. So we're running a bit ahead of what had been budgeted. Anything stand out for you as far as what that might be in relation to?
No, it's a little ahead of schedule, but I don't think that we're going to get into any problems at all as the year progresses with that.
Okay. Okay.
I could take a moment to look at the really big picture now that we've gone over these detailed sheets. I got out my magnifying glass and working from the printouts with regard to the property tax, I'm looking at the estimated for this fiscal year at the next to the last column. And I love this column because it's really important. The revenues for property tax are estimated at $22 million and change. The expenditures from property tax are estimated at $18 million and change. And the surplus, which is called, I think, something like total Sonoma County Library, for the property tax is $3,768,000, et cetera, et cetera. Going through the same drill on the sales tax, we have revenues estimated at 12 million plus, expenditures estimated at 9 million plus, and a surplus in the sales tax account of 3,751,000, et cetera, giving a grand total surplus of 7,519,678 at the end of this fiscal year. This is good if I'm reading it correctly.
Well, I think it's good in the sense that we're not running out of money. I think it raises a question of, are there additional services that we can or should be looking to provide during this very challenging period?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically a good news message. Now, Dave, I'm going to caution you on one thing. The property tax estimate, we haven't, we're going to know a lot more in next month's report when we see what comes in December.
Mhm.
Yes, I agree completely. And I have a feeling that the estimates for us as of December 31st, which will be in our January packet, will be very illuminating and far more accurate.
So it seems like for next month, in addition to making sure that everybody can read the financial reports, we should be prepared, and Ann and Deborah and I will meet ahead of time to look at where we're seeing any discrepancies and to come to the committee with a clear statement of, how the library has shifted priorities and what the impact will be on our financial picture. Is that okay, Ann?
That sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then the last 2 pages, and Randy, I'm gonna turn to you on these two. The statement of special fund activity for both property tax and sales tax. And I'm going to be honest and just say up front, it's not clear to me what I'm looking at here or why I should be looking at it, or why I should be looking at it every month. Could you illuminate this a little bit, please?
I'm sure. So as I've mentioned before, this is really a budget document. And what I would suggesting and what I normally do with our clients is you'll notice in the estimated column, the revenues and expenses for both sales tax and property tax are pretty much self-balancing. And so those estimated amounts are based upon the budget, or what you've actually budgeted. Usually with our clients, we start in the month of December or January. We change that from the budgeted amounts to the estimated amounts. And that's where you start getting a lot more useful information as to where it looks like we're headed. So again, the key number in this document is your ending fund balance available for budgeting. On the screen right now, you see for property tax, that's 15.1 million. Once we change those line or the link to estimated revenues and expenses, that you're going to see that number change. And again, what was just pointed out right now, our estimates are showing that our revenues are going to exceed our expenses by quite a bit. So you see that $15.1 million figure actually jump. And again, this is like the ultimate high level overview that you would have of your current condition based upon your current estimates, which are included in all the detailed documents that none of us really can read very well. And again, I apologize. I know they're eye charts, but fortunately, it is what it is. That's the information that we have. So does that answer your question, Andy, as far as what the use of these statements are?
Well, are you saying that these are documents that will really become more valuable as we get into the budgeting cycle, Randy?
Absolutely, yes. This is your key budget tool to make sure that you are actually adopting a budget that works, that's balanced. You actually have the reserves on hand to do what it is that you're planning on doing.
Okay, so I'm going to take it also that I see that for the sales tax, the last column is estimated, whereas for the property tax, it's still budgeted. You haven't changed it to estimated yet. You will next month.
Yes.
You can continue to provide these, but I'm going to say that we're probably not going to pay much attention to them until we start getting into the budget cycle. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Can I add another comment or possibly a suggestion, going back to the statement about how difficult it is to read those budget tax reports? Would you like to see those condensed into a quarterly format? So in other words, instead of having July, August, September, each with their own column, I would have a single column for Q1. That would definitely shrink the width of these reports. I don't know if that's something that you'd like to see or not. That's just a suggestion, something to do to
I like
kind of.
that.
Well,
Yeah,
I like what we have for the moment. So I'm gonna request it this way. Let's provide printed versions of these reports next month so everybody can see them. based on that, if we want to go to a quarterly, we can then do it. But I prefer that we give everybody a chance to see the monthly data before we do that. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so now we're on to, thank you, everybody. Agenda item 5.3, which is the discussion around the report on voucher payments over $25,000, the report that appears on page 7. And Tom, you were the one who brought this issue up last month, so I'm going to let you kick off the discussion and advocate for whatever position you'd like to express.
Well, when I came on this committee 4 years ago, we didn't have so many big bills. And so there was a $25,000, whatever it was. And what we're getting here is that there were 4 of these this month. Over the last couple of years, we said, well, we keep getting different ones that are happening this month and that month and so forth. So we got more and more information in the report we're getting before Randy's prepared it this way. We had all kinds of things for different things because they were more over the year, and you'd have one month they'd be over 25,000. I want to posit whether 25,000, the question of whether $25,000 cutoff is appropriate, since we're spending so much more money in such larger sums. Maybe we should have a $50,000 cutoff. I don't know. I'm just, it became unwieldy. Too many columns, too much information to really be useful, I thought. And the basic idea, I think it was 4 years ago, was, well, we're poor. If we're spending more than $25,000 on something in 1 month, the commission better know about it. And I'm not sure that that is still a valid theory to operate on.
Okay. I have a few thoughts, but I'm going to hold them for the moment. Would any other members of the committee like to weigh in on this?
This is Barbara. I'll weigh in. I know what Tom's talking about, that we were getting a lot of information. It was kind of confusing. It was kind of too much. This report, I think we ought to keep it at 25. If we went to 50, we wouldn't get anything, for example, for November. I think it's just helpful in terms of tracking. I like to see it anyway. And this is, 4 or 5 months on here on one page. I think it's, part of our fiduciary responsibilities to know about larger amounts. And so I prefer to keep the $25,000 cap in this format.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. Dave or Deborah, comments?
I don't follow this closely, but it seems to me that if we only have 4 entries a month, then we might as well just stick with $25,000 if some committee members want to follow it.
And I am on the margin. It doesn't seem like it's an onerous report, but I also don't want us to be in the grass and looking at small expenses too much.
Okay, I think I may just be off the wall here. I have, I guess, a different concern than everybody. On the one hand, I don't feel a need to see our rent expense every month. We know what that's going to be. It's a regular expense. The fact that we're paying it is good, but I don't feel like I need any special reporting on it. On the other hand, what I think Randy has said is that the report is for individual checks that are over $25,000. But if we look, for example, back at the month of July, we can see that EBSCO subscription services actually received 3 different checks of over $25,000. And that in fact, we paid them close to $160,000 with just these 3 payments. And that doesn't include any checks we sent them that were for less than $25,000. So I guess my question is it only individual checks over 25,000 that we would want to look at as opposed to payments to a specific provider? And if it's payments to a specific provider, how difficult or impossible would it be to amalgamate multiple checks? Like I'm just making this up, but if we said, for example, 25,000 is not a very high limit, let's make it 35,000 or 40,000, but we want to see every supplier who received more than $40,000 from us, whether that was in one check or multiple checks. Is that even possible?
Good question.
So
I want to comment here specifically about EBSCO in July. Each of those checks was for a specific different type of service they provided. One is periodicals, one is database, and the other is subscriptions. So they're different library services, I'm assuming, that they're providing. So amalgamating may take away some information. And the other thing I want to say, this report is easier to understand and read than the report we had been getting 6 or 8 months ago, which had too many columns.
yeah, I think this report's easy to read. So Tom, what would be your ask here? What do you want
Well,
to do different?
I'm not saying anything. I mean, I just, we had so many columns and we're getting so much information there, and this is just a lot better report. So, I mean, I leave it as it is. That's fine.
And do you have a comment on this? Is there a way that you would present this kind of information to us differently?
No.
Are there questions we should ask? Talk to us.
No, I think that, I think that Tom's point is a good one. The way it's presented is much clearer than it used to be. And I think it gives a good overall of some of the major vendors or places where we're spending our money in terms of checks. And like Randy said, there are other ways that we spend money aside from just writing a check. But this is not hard to pull together, and it's easy to look at, and I don't have any objection to continuing with this.
In that case, I'm going to suggest we stay with it for at least a few more months before we make any change. We're still kind of getting our hands around this new financial reporting, and in the absence of a compelling reason to change it, I'm going to suggest we keep it for now. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Next item is 5.4. We had asked Ann at a previous meeting to give us an update on disaster pay for employees, and with Suzanne's help, she pulled together a couple of documents that I think tell a pretty clear story. Ann? This is on
Page 16, 17.
yeah, thank you, 16, 17.
Okay, so you can see going back to July, the amount we were paying out in disaster pay was fairly significant, 51,000. That was about 10% of our total personnel costs. And it's decreased steadily as we've gone along, as we've been able to bring more people back to work. So right now we're paying just over 2,500 per month, and that is 0.5%. So I think we've made excellent progress there.
I think so too, and that was really very compelling, both numerically and graphically.
Graphically, yes.
And I have a question. I mean, it had been declining gradually. The last two pay periods, there's been a significant decline. What accounted for that?
Well, I mean, once we started the curbside service, we were able to bring back more people. But then the big thing was once we recombined the teams, you know, we had our staff split into Team A and Team B. And so whenever one team was working, the other team was at home drawing disaster pay. Once we were able to recombine those teams, then everybody's back to work, which means that there are really only a handful of people who are still getting any amount of disaster pay at all.
Well, I think you and the library management team are really to be commended for this. I know it was a concern to the commission earlier. Any questions for Ann on this?
This is Barbara. I guess this is obviously this fiscal year, July, and I also applaud the progress and the commitment and everything it took to get here, as well as, you know, everything it's meant to the staff. So I think maybe though for a historical record, it might be interesting to go have, you know, from last March to July 1st, which would be a much bigger number than this, just to show maybe, I don't know why, but just for completion purposes.
Sure. So it tells the COVID story. We can
Tell the COVID story, right? And all of its, you know, gruesome detail.
Thanks, Barbara. Anybody else? Okay, thanks very much, Ann. Really
Sure.
appreciate it. Next item, update on the audits. I'm not sure if this, Ann, would be you or Randy or both of you.
I believe Randy's got the most up-to-date information there.
Hey, yes, Jennifer Murray met with Kellen Gilbert from Pacini & Brinker last week via Zoom to get an update from him as to the status of the 1819 audit and what the priorities need to be for us now that we've started working with you. And he indicated to her four or five actual areas that need to be addressed now. The first step is pension. We do need a report for the 1819 report from CalPERS. I know that Jennifer contacted Ricky today to ask her to request that from CalPERS. So I believe Ricky is working on that now. The other areas were compensated absences. So that also includes OPEB. Capital asset reconciliation is an area that still needs to be addressed, along with your health reimbursement account or your HRA. And finally, Kellen noted that the notes, the financial statements need to be verified with library staff. So I would assume that Kellen at some point may still need to contact you, Ann, on that. And that's where we are right now on the 1819 audit. I had Jennifer send me a screenshot of a website that's called SureLink. This is something that Pacini & Brinker uses with all their clients that details all of the items that they need to complete the audit. It has a pie chart that shows what's been received and what's still outstanding. I asked her to send that to me for the actual percentage complete. And per that, they're showing 1819 at 77% complete right now. That being said, again, the pension adjustment is usually quite a bit of work. So once we get that report from CalPERS, Jennifer will be off and running. She's very, very good and very knowledgeable in that area. So I imagine once we get the report from CalPERS, we should get things going pretty quickly.
That's great.
Randy?
Yes.
Randy, I have a question about the CalPERS report. Am I correct in my understanding that we did not get a CalPERS report in the ordinary course of business for 2018 and 19, and we're just now requesting that? Or do we get a copy and we don't have it anymore?
I'm not sure which of those is the correct answer. I just know that Kellen said that they still that the auditors have not received it.
Hey.
Randy, I have a question, and this could be a misunderstanding on my part, but I was under the impression that one of the issues holding up the 2018, 2019 audit was the treatment of some of the long-term assets. Has that been, first of all, was I correct in thinking that had been an obstacle? And if so, has that been resolved?
The first thing that I was told when I first spoke with Senior Brinker was that capital assets, which we can't consider as a long-term asset, were the reconciliation was still incomplete, and that was their primary concern the first time that I spoke with them. So yes.
And have you been able to obtain or provide the information that they were looking for in that area?
Kellen provided some information to me that he had gotten preliminarily for the audit, which I then forwarded on to Jennifer, and she is working on that now.
Okay. This sounds cautiously like good news to me. Is it fair to say that we can't really do much on the 1920 audit until we complete the 18-19 audit?
There is some preliminary work that can be done, and I don't know if in Jennifer's conversation, unfortunately, I was unable to make that meeting with Kellen. I wish I had been there. But generally, we really can't prepare financial statements until we have solid beginning numbers. So until 18-19 is completed, we're kind of stuck in the mud on 19-20.
Okay. And do you have, I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but just do you have an estimate on when you think you might be able to get the auditor the information they're requesting for the 18-19?
A lot of that's contingent on how quickly we can get that CalPERS report. And then I'll have to check in, and I will check in periodically with Jennifer to see how she's coming along with the other items. It's really hard for me to say without knowing in detail the condition of those other items. I would like to say that that's something that we can knock off in a couple of weeks. Again, with the caveat that given the holidays and whatnot, and not really knowing the details of what we're getting into just yet, it's kind of hard to say. And then once our experience with Pacini and Brinker is that once we get a final draft sent to them, they then need to do their due diligence and their review, and that can take another couple of weeks as well. So I would be hesitant to say that we'd see anything within the next month, but again, I really don't know for a fact that that's true right now. That's just my general feeling.
All right, thanks. Any other questions for Randy on the audits?
Thanks for trying to help and make it happen.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, Randy. Thank you. So then the last item before we get into just what we're going to include next time was a discussion item around getting started on the 2021-2022 budget. And I think the question I really wanted to ask is just how this committee can be most helpful in assisting and supporting this process. And I'm going to toss this to you because I know that we're kind of moving ahead with the reimagining effort. Is it your anticipation that that will be done, or will at least be at a point where it can be used to help the staff in setting budget priorities for the coming year?
That's my great hope. Yes, we're moving fast with this process, and with the holidays, we can't do a whole lot right now. But as soon as January rolls around, we're going to start getting these meetings rolling, and I'm hopeful that we can have at least an idea of where we're going with the reimagining, and that will help us. That will better inform the budget process. But I do know that we need to get rolling with the budget process as quickly as possible because, that the time for putting that together will be on us before we know it. In terms of what this committee can do, I think as long as I think it's good for us to start having these conversations now. And I am talking with the division managers to see what kind of predictions they can make as in terms of their needs for the coming year. We'll fold that information together with the reimagining plan information and keep bringing it forward each month to this committee so that you can help us from the get-go in building an appropriate budget for the library.
That all makes sense to me. May I make one additional suggestion or request? I
Of
mean,
course.
that sounds like, in getting ready for next month's meeting, we're going to be looking at the expense picture so far this year to see where we have been underspending or perhaps overspending. We're going to be
Yeah.
looking to make some possible changes to the current year budget. And I think it would be helpful to bring that information into the budgeting process as well, because
Good.
to your point, we've been overspending a lot on digital media because that's what we can provide, and we've been saving money in other areas. So I hope I think we're all hoping we'll get post-pandemic, but
Yeah.
I think some of the priorities that we've seen are likely to continue.
They will. They will. And your suggestion makes a lot of sense to me.
Are there any other thoughts or suggestions from members of the committee as to what you would like to see us doing to help? Deborah, I see you raising your hand there.
Well, last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, I frankly can't remember. The staff presented us with a list of amazing things that, in the perfect world, they would fund. Shiny projects that could, maybe they would just be pilot projects, but then if successful, then we could expand it throughout the system. And I love that I loved hearing the creative ideas from the staff. That was more than just, more books, more hours. But so I wonder if that's something that you're thinking about asking the staff to do, or at least having those internal conversations if they don't come to the commission. But we had fun listening to them and looking at them, I have to say.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be part of it, especially as we get some feedback from the reopening plan. We can say, here are the things that are really important to our community. What can we do about it? And then turn them loose and let their creative juices flow.
I think that would be great.
Andy, could I, just a note of historical perspective, when this new JPA went into effect and we were under, threadbare budget years for a few years, there wasn't any point in setting any priorities because it was, keep the lights on and, do the best we could. Then we had a brief period there of the surpluses and, how are we going to allocate those monies? I think in an ideal world, it's really the commission's responsibility to set budget priorities because, our goals and values and stuff are expressed in the way we, budget our funds. Right now, because we're all just, kind of on the outskirts of what's going on, it seems like I second Deborah's suggestion about having all the creative ideas brought to us. It seems like it should be a somewhat more staff driven, this year because the people in the, are kind of seeing the needs and understanding better. Just a couple of years ago when the commission said it, it was all about, as Deborah said, it was all about hours. We need to, get open. This was our pledge to the public under Measure Y. So anyway, I would welcome, yours and the management team's ideas for budget priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other comments, suggestions? Okay. Do you have any requests of items you'd like us to cover in the next Finance Committee meeting?
I think one of the things we were just talking about and we talked about earlier was to look at items that look like we're going to be severely over budget on, at least from the first 5 months we have of the year, and estimate whether we have to allow more money in those areas or whatever. And that would be part of budgeting for next year, because if these are things we really like that and we feel we need to do in the times we're in, then that's a really good start on what we should be looking at.
Mhm. And what do we do with the surplus money?
It'll go away quickly.
We want to make it doesn't go away.
Thanks, Tom.
I have
Dave?
to make Andy, I'm sure that we follow up on the side pockets issue
Mhm.
and the unaccounted for funds that did not go into the EFS system. I think we've discussed this already, but I want to make sure it makes it onto January's agenda.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think to the extent that we can, it would be great if we could get some more detailed reporting on the monies that are part of those two fund items.
Mhm.
And along with that, what we need to do going forward, what the staff needs to do going forward to make sure that we're appropriately tracking any receipts and any expenditures relative to specific funds. I mean, I know, Tom, you mentioned the two that have been coming to you with specific requests, but we can't assume those will be the only ones. And we should be able to provide a reasonable level of reporting to anybody who's nice enough to give us money. That's a good point, Dave. Thank you. Anything else that you'd like to include as an agenda item for next month? Jane, I'm looking at the scheduled date. I believe that Monday, January 18th is going to be Martin Luther King Day.
Oh, right.
Good point, good point. When would you like to have your meeting then? You can decide on before that same week. It can be discussed and determined later, unless you want to do it now.
Yeah, I would be happy to have it on another day that week if that's a possibility for folks. Could we just move it to the next day, do it Tuesday the 19th?
Sure.
I would think so.
Oh, and is that, how does the staff schedule look? We should check that.
Let me make sure real quick.
Can I add, Andy, that we face this problem every year? It's both January and February. The February one will have the same problem because
Oh,
it's
you're
always a holiday.
You're so smart.
So Barbara, this is not your first rodeo, huh?
Tuesday it is, right?
In the past, we've moved it to the fourth Monday of both months, but
Oh,
whatever anybody wants to do. I think it has to do with the reporting also, and you know, whether but anyway, either one's fine as far as I know.
well, I don't feel like I'm doing enough to overturn things. I don't have to challenge precedent. If it's easier to just move it back a week, I'm okay with that.
So
We're both-
Andy,
You're saying
that'll be the
it's 11?
Well, no, we moved it forward just to give the staff time to have their financial reports completed. So we had it the fourth
Yeah,
Monday of both January and February.
25th and the 22nd.
25th.
yes.
That's good.
I think that would be, that would certainly be okay with me.
Mhm.
Is that general agreement then? We can go with that date.
We need to check with Randy.
Yes,
Yeah.
that works for me. That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay. Great. Well, I think in that case, thank you all. We're still running over an hour, but we are getting shorter. So I feel confident we will get this meeting wrangled under control. I want to thank everybody for your commitment,
Yeah.
your passion, your attention to detail. Dave?
Andy, I have an issue. I have a Zoom issue for you and Jane. I have seen the basics library screen. I also see in the upper right-hand corner the picture of the person speaking. Shortly after the meeting began, I no longer saw myself as an insert. Do you two see me on your master Zoom screen?
Yeah, we do it. And this has to do with the view, Dave. You have a choice of speaker view or gallery view. If you select gallery view, you should be able to see everybody.
No, that gallery view does not work with my computer. I've been using speaker view, but all of a sudden I didn't see myself. And now there I am on the screen suddenly. Maybe a rubber band came off the machine somewhere or a fuse blew. Okay, never mind.
Well,
We'll see what happens next.
let me just say, David, what the deal is when you're talking about when Jane puts the paper up on the screen, the agenda, the only picture that shows is the person talking usually, but there's a little plus and minus. If you hit the plus, you get more people and you can slide them. Well, at least on an iPad you can.
Non-standard setup of Zoom does not work with my computer, essentially. I have to do a workaround that Rana has been very helpful with. So the
Well,
saga
when-
continues.
Just another along the lines here of how things look like. I'm
Yep.
of the feeling that the only people that should be on camera are the people who are in the meeting, and that the observers should not be, the cameras shouldn't be on. And I think that would be a master control person like Jane to control the cameras, right? That's just my feeling. I think any of the committees that we're watching, I was watching some committee, I can't remember which one, but I didn't think that my picture should show. I thought just the committee members should show.
Well, I will make that request at the beginning of next month's meeting
Okay,
and ask people who are not on the committee but attending the meeting to turn off their cameras.
I think it's just a little more clear who's in it, who's in the meeting.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I want to wish all of you a very happy holiday, a Merry Christmas to those of you who celebrate, and a Happy New Year. And may 2021 bring us all better health, safety, and happiness than we've experienced this year.
And look for Jupiter and Saturn tonight.
I know,
Yeah,
It's going to be
It's
fun.
there.
it's about an hour or
half
so.
an hour.
Southwest. Look to the southwest.
Half an hour.
I've been watching every night, so.
Okay, thanks for that.
Bye, everybody. Happy solstice.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks, Andy.